Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to Agile Expertise, a place where we do a lot of sharing and we look to call some of the best speakers out there on the Agile circuit. Today we've got Philip Guiney. Did I say your surname right, Philip?
Yeah, pretty much Guiney.
Philip Guiney, who is one of the experts in flow and flow systems in organizations. I've known Philip for quite some time now, and we originally spoke at the Agile conference, which was always really cool to be at. So I've known Philippe for quite some time now, and he's got his own consultancy called Henko, and there he actually delivers more flow systems. And more recently, he's also set up a training course on flow. And I will share that. The link is actually in the Miro board as well, where you can sign up to his awesome training courses that not run over, it's not just a training course, it's 1 or 2 days. It runs over a course of 6 months where you get trained, you embed, you train, you embed, you train, you embed. So it's not one of those courses where you go in, you learn, and you forget what happens. So it's pretty awesome.
And the one in September would be a 2 days, but after that, yes, we'll have those sessions where we run it on 5 or 6 months cycle. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for correcting me, Felipe. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Felipe and start screen sharing. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And yes, we're going to talk about flow, and we're going to nicely set you up into this, but a quick introduction for me. And if I bring you to where I am, and I like to do this with a Wordley map. I don't know if you know Wordley map, which is also an element in flow system. And effectively, I work as a coach, and I try and make a distinction from coach and agile coach, as I'm coming from a background of ICF-based coaching, systemic coaching called ORSC. And I also used to work as a consultant, but I'm trying to not be so much of a consultant and be more of a trainer and a coach now. And for training, I work a lot with digital strategy, digital organization design, operational excellence, and I'm a big fan of Kaizen. And I work with the flow system, which is a new training and a new sort of education framework or system of learning, they call it, coming from Texas. And actually, it is really coming from Toyota. So it was based on Toyota production system and the people that created Scrum the Toyota way. And now it has evolved into the flow system. And we'll explain what it is about over the course of this session. Moving on, very quickly, there's a link here, and you can register for the course. I've opened a Flow Expert discount code, and we reduced the early bird pricing as well recently. So feel free to join the course. This will be with the co-founder of the flow system and the main person called Nigel Thurlow, who is a very renowned keynote speaker, as well as the creator of Scrum the Toyota way, and the co-author of this book, The Flow System.
Oh, we had Nigel recently, actually.
And another also announcement is I'm also quite fan of Cognitive Edge, Kinevin, and we'll cover some element of Kinevin today. But one thing less known about that is SenseMaker. And SenseMaker is a way of creating sense of the environment, and it's a way of pulsing audiences or pulsing your work system, pulsing your customers. And there is a SenseMaker running out there at the moment about reimagining the future of work. And I will really strongly invite you to go and test it for yourself, so you see what SenseMaker is about. But at the same time, it will provide some data points and that will organize a meetup at some point to play back what we are learning, as well as how it's like on the other side of the curtain of SenseMaker. And we're going to do a quick sense-making exercise today that will give you a flavor. So by all means, it's a very, very short thing. It will take you 5 minutes. But if you want to go and experience for yourself, that's actually opening your eyes to sense-making, and we'll show you the other side of it afterwards. Okay, so announcements done. And we're going to do a small sense-making exercise to start. And let me invite you to follow. And I'd like you, if you want, of course, tell us a story about flow of agility in your organization. And if you can capture a very short story on one post-it note, so each of you, do that on one post-it note, and then you can place a green dot on your story if it's a positive story, or a red dot if it's a negative story. So if we take 2-3 minutes, anything that comes to mind, anything that is present in your head about flow of agility, let's say in the past months or something, anything that really sticks out, whether it's positive or it's negative. Core team using Kanban via Trello. So it's all coming up. So a few of you are still hovering around. Please pick up a post-it note and tell us a story. Good, good, good. Thank you. So we're seeing 2 green dots so far, 1 red dot. Few more red dots being picked up. So reading those stories, introduce the 7 R's for flow, bottleneck in a platform engineering Kanban board. There are 400 plus initiatives in progress in my organization, and I guess not much work in progress limit control. Disjointed and inconsistent flow exists in multiple teams of the organization. Using BDD to help conversation between business and IT, avoiding racy in silos. Green dot, great. Creating an anti-pattern with hierarchy decision-making, red dot. And you see how with sense-making, you get a very quick sense of what's in this system, what you're thinking about, what is on top of the experience that is out there. There's some great stories and some not so great stories. So if you have anything left to capture, please do it rapidly. And if you can mark with dots. So I'm pleased to see a few green ones using Agile VSM to reduce waiting time between silos, having everyone in the same boat. It's interesting how the green story seems to all be relating to collaboration, isn't it? So thank you very much for that. And if you keep on your red dot or your green dot, and we're going to move to the next page now, and let me call you here. And if you take, if you were red dot or green dot, if you take one of the dots on the side, on the first triad, in my story, Agile was helping us with better software delivery, digital mastery, on not helping very much. And if you want to place a dot in relation to this, what Agile was helping you the most with. So take the dots that are on the side to the triangle. And if you want to position of the colors that your story was about, and if you want to position them on the triad in relation to the what we call signifiers at those ends of the triad. Is that clear for everybody? Or is that a bit confusing?
Philippe, I have a quick question. So that's clear, thank you. Just a quick question. So what if the use of Agile has nothing to do with software delivery? It's more very different. Where do you want me to, how do you want me to?
In that case, it might not be completely suited to this one.
Okay.
So it does help on alignment. So yes, I appreciate. Generally, you have a NA square, and in that case, that would have been NA.
Okay, I won't vote.
No worries.
Observe. Thank you.
So we're seeing basically, kind of expected better software delivery, some digital mastery, and not helping very much. And interestingly, it is the red dots that are going there. So thank you for that. If we move to the next triad, and if you want to do the same as well as the last triad, if you want to put your dots, and maybe in that case, that would be actually also relevant to answer and what the stakeholders were expecting when working with Agile. Were they expecting to reduce costs? Were they expecting some digital innovation and sort of digital mastery as a business? Or were they just following the fashion? And a lot of those things are sometimes in a nuance, it's in between digital innovation and reducing cost. Maybe it's digital innovation, maybe reducing cost, maybe just following fashion. And here you see that you have stories that are green in reducing cost and stories that are red in reducing cost. So how do we have less of the red, more of the green? And that's the kind of thing with SenseMaker. You generally, with the real SenseMaker, you can trace back the story to the dot. So that way you can deep dive into the flavors and the understanding. And maybe, just maybe, your green dot next to the red dot is actually your solution that already exists where you are. So it's a way of creating sense and letting that being completely emergent. So thank you for that. And if you want to capture the last triad as well, in your story, the challenges were in the teams, in the leadership, or in the organization. And even if you have green dot stories, I'm sure there were some challenges. Where were those challenges mostly? And indeed, if they were everywhere, you put your dot in the center. Right, so we see that there's quite a few organization challenges and some leadership challenges. And interestingly, not so many challenges in the teams themselves. Which is an interesting, and I don't need to tell you that, this is the collective sense that emerges from your own stories and the reality that you're living on a day-to-day. So thank you very much for that. And that's kind of techniques, you can, and of course, using sense making, ideally you do that, with hundreds or 200 people and more, or thousands even. And that allows you to make a great sense and to relate back the stories to the narrative. And the narratives are really quite critical to understand the flavors of what's really happening on the ground. So thank you for taking part. And I invite you to try the real SenseMaker for yourself and contribute some stories. So that will give us material to work with. And at the same time, you will get a real flavor of the power of this. And it's something you can use for yourself. So talking about flow now, and I'm going to invite you to the next, to the beginning of the talk. And if you want to imagine the idea of flow in your work, what comes to mind for you? Is it something smooth, steady, more like on the left side? Or is it something very, very tortuous, maybe even exciting, but it's not frictionless, let's say? And I left you think about that. Oh, you don't need to put dots, don't worry, don't worry. And a definition of flow, if you want, is that it is being able to continually and frictionlessly add value, meaning your day-to-day work is going to add value. And you don't have to actually, climb mountains to deliver this value. And of course, it's easier said than done. And the idea of flow is very much a linear concept. It's very much something that, used to be really in automotive and other lean manufacturing, which is more of a production chain type thing. But it's important to understand what underpins it. The idea of just in time. And the idea of just in time is an idea that we find again in Agile, when we say we work from small increments that we deliver live. So we're creating a just-in-time flow. And despite software being different, that idea of just-in-time is also very useful. There's an idea of production leveling, which Junka, where we look at, not having peak and troughs. And the idea of continuous delivery is actually to do that. And working in an agile way is actually removing the needs for doing projects, because we're continuously delivering software, we're continuously delivering value. And that is a form of production leveling. There's also the idea of Jidoka, and it's actually a fundamental principle and pillar in Toyota production system, which is automation. So it's automation with a human touch. It's the idea that, and the manifestation of that is the end and core, that if you see that the quality is not correct, you can stop the production chain. And you can imagine that, when you stop a production chain, and I was lucky to go and visit Porsche, the car manufacturer. If the production chain, there's a car moving every 2 minutes. If the production chain gets stopped, for 2 minutes, it's a car worth of stoppage. That has a big cost. And despite that, people are very much encouraged to take the control of stopping the production chain. And it does stop multiple times an hour. And it is the idea that if there is a problem, that problem, and they're not able to fix it in 2 minutes, they stop it because you don't want to actually let that problem go through. You do not pass a problem, you do not accept a problem, you do not create a problem. And if any of those cases actually happen, you pull the cord, you stop the chain, because there are many cars affected with that. And this is also a concept that we don't apply very well in technology, because when we have a problem, we just let it go very often. And there's pressure deliveries and a number of things like that, where we don't strive for very high quality, and that happens a lot. And then there's the Gemba Kaizen, the idea of going on the shop floor, seeing how things happen and improving, and continually doing this. Now, in technology, there isn't a shop floor, but there are team events, and people can visit those and can actively participate in those. So the Gemba Kaizen is also an important concept that we do very, very poorly in technology. We have the retros in Agile, but it's very poorly done most of the time. And all this is really cultural. It's not a process, it's behaviors. Lean is completely based on behaviors. Now, Lean TPS and Lean is the American somehow interpretation and implementation of the Japanese concept. So a lot of those things have morphed into methods, but at the origin, it's all about behaviors and stimulating the behaviors, relying on human intelligence to contribute to improving the workspace and the products. So those are very important concepts that in a linear view of flow, that is a different, it's a manufacturing process. All those concepts actually have resonance in the non-linear work of technology. But if we think about it as well, and moving on to the next slide, that's how we think work gets done. We do a project plan and we have a finish date, and maybe all of you are agilists and you've gone over that already, but it's still very often how the work is seen in the place of work. That project plan is reality. Well, it was speculation, but now it becomes reality, and that's the deadline, and we're going to do everything to meet that deadline. Now, I'm going to invite you to play a game. And I don't know, I'm probably going to show my age here, but I was born at a time when Donkey Kong, or I was grown up enough at a time where Donkey Kong was actually a very famous game, and very often it feels like that's how we're delivering. So I'd like you to contribute on that journey of hell to deliver software. Please tell me, and have some fun. What are those obstacles to flow that you're seeing on that journey? What are those forests? What are those snowy areas? What is that tiger? Where are all those sharks? Do you have even names for those sharks? Is there any snakes, tornadoes, and gorillas on your way to deliver? So please write something there and position it on the way, and I'll invite you even to talk about it afterwards. By all means, we need to respect client confidentiality or your employer's confidentiality. So don't put names or anything like that. But let's have some fun. Let's put some sticky notes on that journey of delivery, and please tell us those frictions that you're feeling in achieving flow. So multitasking, and please, move them onto the journey of delivery there. Do they feel like a tiger to you, or a shark, or landmines, grenades and landmines? Can you be a bit more specific on that one? It's all very, very quiet, isn't it?
You've got us all on mute, I think that's why. Or I've got everyone on mute. Feel free to chat, everyone. So if you've got any questions, yes, please do chat.
So as you're typing them and as you're moving them somewhere, I will invite you to come off mute and tell us about whether it's a shark, whether it's just a pit, whether a eagle is going to catch it, or whether it's a tiger there and some landmines. Nobody, there's a snake somewhere. So we got multitasking still to position. You want to position multitasking somewhere? And let me move those out of the way. We are talking about big rocks right now, resistors to be more agile. Do you want to move those? And that's going to give us a good start. So in that journey, we would like to talk about develop work taking for a long. So develop work taking a long to be picked up for review and test. Do you want to tell us more about this?
Yes, so one of the frustrations I have sometimes is when a developer finishes a piece of work and it takes days for the reviewer or the tester to pick it up. It just slows down the whole flow.
Thank you. We are talking about big rocks right now. So what kind of big rocks is that? Who has written that one?
That was me. So yeah, in terms of big rocks, what we're doing, we're embarking on transformation work at the moment. And as part of that transformation, the big rocks are the focus teams that need support. So that's kind of what I meant by big rocks. But the thing is, if we dig deeper and go behind the scenes a little bit, there's a lot of issues around around flow as well. So, and that's to do with the length of flow. So from end to end delivery, it's really clunky, and there's loads of rocks we have to get rid of now.
It sounds like boulders even, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. And the teams don't know the purpose of the work. Do you want to tell us more?
Yeah, sometimes I see teams that aren't just don't understand the vision of either the products or the initiative they're working on, and they get lost in the work they're doing, heading the wrong direction. That's why I picked the forest, lost in the forest, I thought.
Good. And I love the images, of this. What else do we have then? Oh, we have a few ones. Let's say multitasking. Who talks about multitasking? Do you want to come off mute and tell us about it?
Yep. I think sometimes we think we are more productive being on different stuff, especially with management, not only as individuals. Sometimes we are delighted to be working on different things, like stars. We think it's gonna be better. And unfortunately, I think it does add some waiting time in between the stuff, and it is not that efficient. That's why it was with the stars.
And it's a lot of ends off as well. End offs, yeah. Great stuff. A fairy tale story. And let's skim through some of those. Do you want to tell us a fairy tale story in the clouds over there?
Yes, so we just completed, not completed, we just finished the first phase of transformation, and everybody is writing their stories. Assuming they're applying the human experience or the bad examples they have, and they add a huge buffer. And the stories are, instead of finishing in 40 points, it's 60 points. So it's a human thing, I would say. So,
and that's not unusual, it's, and that's something we often fail to take to stakeholders, because stakeholders like the idea that they want predictability in a way. But predictability comes at a huge cost, because you're going to give them the worst case and the biggest buffer until they scream. So they need to appreciate very often that it doesn't give them a good outcome to want something highly predictable. And that's what I often talk about, elevating, and we have a duty, especially on product management, about elevating the unpredictable and finding ways of being able to say, it's better for you that we don't try and give you an exact answer. And let me explain how and how we're going to progress about it. And you time box and you do some form of review and you work in an agile way then. So very, very good point. I see plenty new ones, lack of understanding between each other, undefined roles and responsibilities, grenades and landmine, unknown promised surprises pop up. I'm very curious about that one. The clown doesn't really know what they want until he sees it. Well, that's kind of agile, that. Individuals trying to steal your thunder, insisting on estimating against timelines, undefined roles and responsibilities. And do you want to tell us a few things? I mean, for those I've just called out here, do 2 or 3 of you want to come on audio and tell us about those?
Hey, Philippe. So grenades and landmines, I've missed one on Monday or Tuesday. So that was quite lucky. Pure luck.
You didn't step on one, right?
Apparently I was so very, very close to it. But then my CTO reminded me, you were very close to that landmine. So thanks for telling me after I was close to it rather than in advance. Yeah, and there's some surprises that are coming through where things have been, you know, before my time. I arrived at an organization. Some promises were made in March. No visibility about what was agreed to who. And then suddenly it's arrived at my plate. It's your problem. Okay, I wasn't in the conversation. I didn't make the promise. I can't even keep that promise. So can we have a negotiation on what your expectations were? So yeah, these are kind of like challenges when the organization is going through a transformation, transition, and people are unsure about the whole agile wave or agile journey. So they really, you know, look at agilists as like, oh, you guys just salespeople coming in with this fancy fad. And I said, no, I've been doing it for 12 years. It's not a fancy fad.
And to a degree, it's not necessarily about agile. It's about plain common sense, right?
It is common sense, but it's about communication and that lack of visibility. Hence the surprises. When you don't know what you're up against, you're going to encounter those, right? So it's a good challenge. It's a good challenge to try and get everything visible now. So that's what I'm aiming for, visibility.
Thank you.
It's also the idea that it's, how can I put it? You know, Rex, I think you just hit a nail on the head there. It's like they think that we come in and like we've just got such a cushy life and it's all easy work. But actually, you know, what we're doing is actually undoing a lot of their work to redo it as well. So for example, let me think, can't think of an example now. But it's along the lines of, you know, they've created layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy onto their organization and as a result of that, common sense has just gone out the window. So what we're doing is literally going back to basics.
Yeah, I've used that phrase already. Back to the drawing board, back to the whiteboard.
Exactly.
I've heard a story, and as anecdotally, about an organization where the urgent invoicing process is actually when you receive that urgent invoice by email, you print it and then you put it through the scanner to get processed, which made me laugh, but that's what it is.
That's
I love the idea that we're killing a tree every time we have to actually process an invoice. I'm going to move on now, and apologies to those that we haven't necessarily heard from, but there will be more opportunities to talk about those. And I'm going to copy your very interesting statements into starting to make sense of that complexity. And let me just put it here. And this is what we call the 4-point exercise. And many of you probably have gone through it. And And maybe to accelerate it a little bit, do you see, and based on your own tickets, your own post-its here, do you see best candidates for the corners? And we start with the first corner. Now, everybody knows how to do this. We just need people to do it. We just need some capacity to actually look at that. And it's plain simple. How do we do that? Is there a candidate in your stories here that will go against that one? And it's perfectly fine if there isn't a candidate. We're just trying to go quickly with this exercise. And I see you're already moving towards the next one. So are we saying there isn't really a candidate for that one? And in that case, I'm going to move some tickets a bit outside here. There isn't one. And that's fair enough. It just goes to show that none of the work we do is actually that simple. Our builds take too long. Thank you very much. So here we go. A build take too long. Then we have the next one, and I've seen quite a few of you have actually moved things to it. Experts can save us a lot of time. We need their help. So we have a few of those. Team don't know the purpose of the work. The clown doesn't really know what he wants until he sees it. PO taking glory, and the poor team unrewarded. So I'm not sure those things are really relying on experts to have a solution for you there. If the clown doesn't really know what they want, is an expert going to be able to solve that? I think it's more in the realms of nobody can actually know. We need to figure it out by showing something to that client, right?
So it's more over here.
So it's more over here, yes. PO taking the glory and the poor team unrewarded. I'm not sure where that goes. And maybe that kind of goes in the middle in that case. And if we can't make sense of them, maybe it's in the middle. So, the next one, nobody can know. We need to figure it out for ourselves, meaning there isn't a solution out there. There isn't an expert out there, or the expert is not in our context. And the context matters. So we need to actually, in that case, we need to do some experiment. We need to do something to understand it and make sense of it ourselves. And then, what the hell? We need a solution quick. The website is down. We don't know where it's coming from. We don't know what's needed to fix it. We don't know what caused it, but we all need to figure out how we're going to resolve that one quickly. So individuals trying to steal your thunder, fair enough. Now, if I go back to everybody knows how to do this, we just need people to do it. So multitasking, do we all know how to do it? Is it just a question of organizing your tasks well, or is there more to it? The builds take too long. Does everybody know how to make that shorter, or does it be an expert?
I think given the right team, everybody should know how to reduce build time. This is a question of, I think given the right team composition, everybody should be able to fix that.
So if there isn't the expertise in the team, you're going to need an expert, probably.
Okay, yes.
So in that case, I would say that one probably belongs more here or somewhere here in between. And it's important you can sort of nuance your choices, on the journey. And multitasking, yeah, you can organize your task maybe, but maybe, if you don't multitask, then you get into a panic. And now we're seeing that a panic will get you into, I need a solution quick, and suddenly you need to drop everything, for instance. Develop work taking long to be picked up for review test. And maybe that's just a process issue. And indeed, that one fits squarely in there. Work fails, QA rework takes a long time. Maybe that's okay, that's an existing process. Insisting on estimating against timeline. And that one may be different in different situations, and maybe we put it here. So you see that the problems you're talking about flow don't all belong to the same sort of problems, same typology of problems. And making sense of it allows you to start seeing that you don't have the same problem. There's no one-size-fits-all answers to those problems. And if we move to the next one, which I'm going to unhide, and for those that are familiar, you will know about the Kinevin framework. And if I walk you through quite quickly, and if you're novel to it, I mean, new to it as well, it's worthwhile looking into cognitive edge. And in terms of flow, it's starting to understand and make sense of the type of challenges you're facing. So you have challenges that are of a clear nature. And for those challenges, your response to them, your response type is you sense the challenge, you categorize, because those are problems we know, those are situations we know, and then you determine your response, and generally there will be a process or a policy in place. So typically in that space, there's rigid constraint, and there's established sort of standard practices to allow you to resolve those things. Now, if you move to the next step up, the upper right, and that's right side is about ordered issues. It's the type of challenges where there is generally a non-answer. We have made sense of it before. We know how to deal with this. So on the top right, it's more the complicated domain. So you sense in the complicated domain, you analyze and you respond. And typically, you can save yourself sometimes if you have experts available. You can also, in that case, do the root cause analysis. So if it's a problem that is knowable, we're going to dig down to the root cause so it doesn't happen again. And you make sense of it that way. So it's a place of governing constraints and good practices, where generally the people with more experience would know, or the experts into given domains knows, and you save yourself a lot of time if you bring them to the table. Now moving to the other side, and before transitioning to that, there's this AC in the middle, which stands for the fifth domain of Kinevin, and one of probably the most important one, which is called aporetic and confused. The domain is confused, but it's itself subdivided in two parts, aporetic and confused. Confused is where you generally start. You try to make sense of something, and you haven't made sense of it yet. So you're in a state of confusion in relation to that problem. And aporetic is actually when you start getting to the point of making the decision, or you purposefully keep in that state, and you're going to decompose and recompose your problem and find where the problem itself may fit, or you may find where constituent parts fit, and maybe it's across the whole thing. And then you have the complex domain, sorry. And the complex domain is, there isn't aporetic, it's called. I see the question in the A side, aporetic, in the center. So the complex domain is somewhere where it's unknown unknowns. We don't have knowledge a priori of what's in there. So if you don't know, you're going to probe, you're going to try something. And you're going to try something small so you can learn quickly. And you're going to get your way through by probing, learning, probing, learning. So you probe, you sense, and you respond. And by probing, at some point, you may start noticing repetition. And that repetition gets you into the liminal space between complex and complicated. And through repetition, you start confirming that this is actually right. And then you start making sense of it and having understood the thing and being able to repeat the success of it. So, you would have transitioned from complex to complicated. Okay. And that space is generally, and that's very important to realize, it's about enabling constraints and emergent practices. Whereas the space of order, it's more about limiting constraints. And in a linear process, you have limiting or inhibiting constraints, and things like the theory of constraints and so on allow you to remove those constraints. On the complex side, you actually work with constraints. You look at what is called enabling constraints. Is how you're going to realign, create constraints that will reposition your system to act differently. And the system, you create boundaries where the systems will morph itself. And there's dispositionality in the system. So you work with that in the complex. And then the chaotic is basically, there is urgency. There's a problem and there's urgency. So you need to restore stability. And to restore stability, you're going to act first. Then you're going to sense, are we stable? And being stable is probably being in another environment and respond. So it's about restoring that stability. But also, chaotic is a space of no constraints. If your whole IT is down, what you're going to do is you're going to lower any constraints to bring it back up. So it's an incredible space for innovation. When you have no constraints, you can have total innovation. So some people and clever people tend to use disruption or the chaos and the disruption of chaos to lower the gradient of change and actually exploit that for change and for disruption, because it's an incredibly innovative space due to the lack of constraints. So if you want to manage flow in a complex, variable, changing digital environment, you need to really be able to make sense of your challenges and deploy the right type of response to your challenge. And that's very fundamental to understand that. Now, and I've seen there's a question, so I'm going to check that question quickly. Aporetic adjective characterized by an irresolvable internal contradiction or logical disjunction. So you would need to have a look at the wiki of Kinevin to get you more the complexity perspective on it. But yes, in aporetic is a way where you're in the confused space and you're looking at exits to make a view of it. And sometimes you are staying in that confused space for a good reason, or sometimes because you cannot make sense of it. So moving on and revealing the next thing, the next one. And it is a very important one to realize as well that, and let me bring you to it. What's important here is to understand that teamwork pretty much happens everywhere. And it's your ways of making sense of the environment everywhere. At the simplest end of the clear domain, it's just the clear domain is kind of the sausage factory. You know how to do things and you just repeat them and do them. So indeed here you can divide the work. You can say all individuals, you divide and conquer. You do that work and you just repeat and do it. Now, the danger with this, and that's the wiggly bit at the bottom of Kinevin, next to the copyright there. it's to show a 3D, basically cliff. The danger of that is when the repetition doesn't really work anymore for its context, then basically you can have catastrophic failure, because people are regimented to apply the process, to apply the method, to do it like this and repeat it. If the conditions change, then basically you can face catastrophic failure. And what you do is you fall straight into chaotic. And what happens is there is a cliff to climb back up. That's this 3D idea. There is a cliff to climb back up, and you may not recover from that. So in that domain, the idea of Kaizen is very interesting because it stimulates the work. It stimulates people to think about how can we do things better. And that stimulation, and especially as a teamwork, that stimulation creates resilience. People are self-critical to the product, self-critical to their ways of working, and that creates resilience in itself. And if you think on a production line, to produce a car, people fix a wheel all day long. That's not super exciting work. But the excitement of their work is to think, is there a better way of doing that work? Or if I do that work very well, can I actually spare time to check the gap on that door on every car? And they spend time thinking, how do they make best use of their time? And they work with their team to figure how do we make best use of the 2 minutes that this car is with us to get the best possible job done, and as much of a job done as we can. Not just fixing the wheel, but checking the quality around the wheel, for instance. And that's where Kaizen takes place. So using Kaizen in the clear environment, in simple thing, but also complicated in other things, actually allows you to be self-critical and create resilience. In the complicated domain, it is about expertise. So it is about learning. It is about teamwork. It is about bringing experts to the equation when we need them, but also sharing that expertise so it becomes more clear for everybody. So we are able to have that expertise as common practices now. So we need to stimulate the pairing in that domain. When we are in a confused state in the middle and to those questions about aporetic, sometimes it's easier to make sense of it collectively, because some people will have some ideas that others don't, and they may have the clarity, and the stimulation of the group may actually emerge some clarity that wasn't there individually. Now, if we go to the complex domain, teamwork is also the basis there. Multiplying the diversity to explore lateral options, create agency in the part, create agency in the teams. How can they make their own decision? How they can test quickly, how they can get feedback loop, how they can maybe talk to a customer, how they can take those initiatives so that we quickly make sense of things. We quickly test the landscape of possibilities. And that is all about teamwork again, but maybe wider teams sometimes. There is more permeability to what the system really means in that domain, because we need to explore beyond the known boundaries. And then in chaotic, well, it's also about teamwork. We rally anybody by hook or by crook to get that problem solved. So one thing to remember is if you do not have teamwork, it's very difficult to operate in any of the domains but the simplest one. So, teamwork is also a fundamental stone, foundational stones to working in complexity and achieving flow in complexity. So I'm going to move on now, and a bit of a presentation before the finish line. So if we go to the customer orientation, so in order to achieve flow, how do you organize? How do you do things? And I get that question very often. fundamentally, and it's a very simple answer, is you need to orient to the customers. Customer first. What does that mean, customer first? It means highest quality, next slide, lowest cost, shortest lead time, and those are the definition of Toyota production system, and delightful experiences as well. And that's something we can add in the digital world where the experience actually matters. And if you think, there's nothing about profit here for the company. It's all about an orientation to the customers. Customers has the highest quality, the lowest cost, and the shortest lead time, and actually delightful experience. When they have that, the profit will take care of themselves. It's all about the customer orientation and thinking not about value as, you know, financial value, but about the customer orientation. Let's worry about giving them highest quality, lowest cost, shorter lead time, delightful experiences. And to achieve this, and the next slide is, you need to keep in balance your operational excellence and your product innovation. Because if you don't have the operational excellence, what will very quickly happen is you're going to have fire drills. You're going to have production instability, and that's going to hit most of your time. And as we said earlier, you're going to have context switching between, oh, you're working on this feature and suddenly, no, we need to actually fix that problem. And it becomes completely impossible to actually follow a path of customer first and strategy. And once you have that, you can have product innovation. And the innovation of today becomes the excellence of tomorrow. Once we made sense of it, once, you know, it's innovation, it becomes common practice at some point, then it becomes part of the excellence. And it's a healthy cycle. The more excellence you have, the more time you have for innovation. And I'm going to ask you to participate on the next slide, and let me bring you to this one. And I'm going to open a vote on this one. And if you think about, so there's 2 minutes for voting and you've got 5 votes. And if you think on those 5 tickets, and I would like you to use your 5 votes by clicking on those tickets, on the plus sign on the tickets. So you can vote now. And clicking on those plus signs, if you could tell us, out of your 5 votes, where most time was spent on the last sprint. So if it was equally shared, then you click on all the tickets. If on the last sprint you were involved with, it was to do mainly with unplanned work, or only with you spend your 5 votes on unplanned work and fixing defects. Is it understood? Is it clear?
Yeah, Philippe, we've got 2 of the same tickets, technical upgrades and upscaling.
Oh, sorry. Made a mistake here. One is technical upgrade and upscaling. And the second one is actually, it was meant to be people upskilling and development, teamwork development, people upskilling. So the bottom one, consider it as people development and upskilling, and teamwork as well, upskilling. Absolutely sorry about that. So if the time was spent only on new features, spend all the vote on that. If it was spent on people, spend your votes on the bottom ones. If it was spent on technical upgrade, on the technical one. So you just click on the plus buttons. Okay. So there's only 13 seconds left, I'm afraid. Have you voted?
Oui, je termine, Christophe.
Can we see the results? I'm not sure. Did you all vote or? Ah, yes, we can see the results. So 10 10 on unplanned work and defects fixing, 1 on BAU, 9 on new features, 2 on teamwork and people upskilling, and 5 on technical upgrades and upskilling. Thank you for that. So, what this is telling us is that, and based on the votes, the top category where time is spent is actually firefighting. And unplanned work and defects fixing is not adding value. Unplanned work, defects fixing is waste. And I'm sorry to crack it to you, but defects, yes, it's necessary to do, absolutely necessary to do, but it is actually waste. And if I reveal the next slide, so you have that unplanned work is non-value add. It's waste, complete waste. And the BAU, if you think about it, is just to stay still. Is something we have to invest to stay still. It is necessary non-value add at the end of the day. You're not growing from it. You're just staying put. The feature, new features, is value add. And the investments in technology and in people is an enabler to future value add. So if you look broadly at those work types, you can start thinking, well, how are we actually able to add value? Where is the time going? And it's not like you can really have a choice. If you have a lot on non-value add and necessary non-value add, and that's where you spend most of your time, you got to invest to eliminate the non-value add and to optimize your necessary non-value add. Because that only can give you the regained time to have more time on the value add. Okay? So it's an important concept, and it's very easy to measure that. It's very easy to look at where are we spending the time? How much value add time are we actually spending when doing the work? And what is that telling us? Are we investing enough to actually reduce our waste or not? And that works in digital work like it works in manufacturing. And you don't need to have a linear thing to do that. Now, it's true that in the value add time, sometimes you're going to experiment on things that won't work, but this was value add time. This was time where you were genuinely trying to make something work. At least you're spending the time on that, not on other waste. And the view is to maximize the time you can spend on that. So how we also achieve this, and if we go to the next slide, there's an element of organization here. And, what I have there is not really that much of a caricature. If you think the work initiates from the business, it goes through some change teams that package it up for the product team to consume and to then sort of organize with delivery and architecture to use the engineering pool through projects to deliver, and then it goes into the support of product support and production support. And you have supporting functions at the bottom that kind of allow you to organize project and budget project and report on the status of projects and so on. And it's very difficult to know here, where is the value getting added? And quite often you will have a couple of feature teams in the project, and you have a massive structure around it. And those two project teams are actually offshore for cost reasons. And the whole structure around is onshore and very, very costly and bloated. So, how to think in terms of flow, it is to think in terms of, and that's the next one, yeah. It is to think in terms of value streams, and those are the teams that add the value. Value streams is where the value is added. It's that simple. all the teams that are outside of the value streams, and the value stream is the value from a customer perspective, from somebody that will pay for the service. So it has to be not intermediary users or anything. It's about people that will pay for the service. So how can you organize your teams that way? Because then they will be able to work from the value. Then they will be able to relate everything they do to a customer first. That will be inbuilt in the teams. And of course, they cannot work on their own. So that's where you have other teams, and those teams are here to support the value streams to add value, to support them to be able to solely focus on added value. So maybe you have components teams like DBA teams and so on. How can they be connected into those core value streams to add value? And how can they make that as frictionless, almost as an extension to allow that value add? How can you maybe have some platform teams that are here to take care of the environment? If your core value stream teams need to figure how you procure an environment, how you upgrade it, they are not adding value during that time. How can you have teams that take care of that? And so your value streams can solely focus on adding value. And when you see an organization like that, yes, you don't have 100% in the core value stream teams, but it's very clear that the core value streams are here to add value. All the other teams are here to support them adding value. And you strike that balance. And you see what's needed to provide the technology evolution, provide the skill set evolution, the engineering evolution, and all those things need support. But it's very, very clear how we're adding value when we organize that way. And beyond this, there's that emerging idea of a constructor theory. And the constructor theory is very much around looking at systems from the parts and having the agency and the intelligence in the parts to connect and coordinate and recombine to do something that you expect, as well as other possibilities. And in organizing teams like that, it's also important to align to value stream, but to understand the value of tomorrow may not be the value of today. So how we create connections between the teams so they can rearrange, create something new, invent something new. And very often it's about giving them the agency to do that. And it's creating intelligent teams. And there's books on that. I've got actually, and I'm not lying to you, there's one here. And it's creating that intelligence in teams and in the parts that they can recombine and do things different. And innovation comes from that. So now, after all this, I'm going to ask you, and I hope I've done a decent job to actually giving you some ideas about improving flow and seeing your organizations in a different perspective. And I'd like you to say, based on what you learned today and the obstacles that you were capturing and the complexity of those problems you were dealing with, what do you think and what can you go and do in terms of leadership? What's needed in leadership to achieve flow from your perspective? What's needed in the teams? What's needed in the organization? And what fundamental knowledge and practices are needed? So I invite you to capture on those Post-its what are those ideas that are emerging for you and that you can take and maybe implement tomorrow. And if you can capture that, as you're thinking aloud, capture it, because you may not be able to do what you're capturing tomorrow, but other people might. And that's really harvesting the collective diversity of this system tonight, this group tonight, that the emerging ideas of what can be changed, what can be improved at a different level of knowledge and practices, leadership, teams, and organization. So listen to the team in the leadership. Don't be shy. Embrace changes. So what would be an enabler? And I invite you to come on audio as well for that. There's not many people. What would be an enabler to embrace changes? It's useful to think about those things as enablers, not just as something to do, but how can we enable them to embrace changes, or what would enable them to embrace changes? So experiments, clarity on the flow and where blockage lie, create a clear vision and strategy at the organization, full value stream vision. In the teams, courage, foundational knowledge, value stream mapping, ability to visualize the flow. In the teams, loud voices. Tell us about the loud voices. Tell us out loud.
Yeah, that was me, as always. We've got very shy team members. Sometimes they're afraid of speaking out, or, you know, give any impression that something's not right. I think the leaders, actually I'm going to add that to the leaders, is encourage more transparency and truth.
And, you know, I get that quite often, loud voices. The one thing is to invite the quiet one to speak.
Yeah.
And you can only lead a horse to water, right?
Yeah.
One trick I often do is explaining, and, you know, I'm a systemic coach by trade. It's explaining that it's a voice of the system, and all voices of the system are relevant and they need to come out. And it's not necessarily somebody that needs to feel. They are a voice. Everybody is a voice of the system. So for the system to be healthy, the voices have to come out. And another element to figure as well is the gift of innovation and the gift of seeing something different out there is probably about 15% of the people, if we are very generous. And I think Dave Snowden has this thing about looking at, you know, X-rays where there's with tumors, and there's a picture of a gorilla in the X-ray, and only 17% of the people notice that picture.
Wow.
And that's a gift. The people that notice those things are a gift. And it's not always the same people, by the way. And if they are quiet, nobody will know. So it's really inviting those people, saying maybe the quiet voices are the innovators. So what alliance as a team can we do? And it's a question of the louder voices sometimes developing a curiosity for what the others have to say. And the ones that are quiet, understanding what is their edges to speak and how can the team make it easier for them. And creating alliances of that nature. And actually you can see behind me, there's an edge model, very simple edge model. How can we get those people to actually move to a secondary, move to a place where they're more comfortable to speak? So as we're about to part way, I'll invite you to voice some of those great things you're writing. And do you want to tell us a little bit about them? And we're seeing already, you know, a lot of ideas coming out. And any ones that you'd like to speak about? Rax.
Yeah, this is about collaboration. I've got different cultures across different countries, and encouraging that collaboration to get more cohesive. The organization is split across different time zones as well, so that's a challenge in itself. But yeah, if I can get the collaboration piece going, then we'll get a smoother integration of how we want to work.
And no, I couldn't support that more. Collaboration, and it's very often when I go into teams, the first thing I do is I sit on the stand-up and listen. And a tip for you all, if your stand-up is giving a status update, each in turn, you're just not collaborating. If you have more tickets on the board than you have people in the teams, you're not collaborating. You're dividing the work. And it's very, very simple. If you start saying on the stand-up, what work do we finish today? We're not starting any new work. We're finishing the work we have here. What can we finish today? Who can help? Suddenly, you're creating collaboration. And change doesn't require massive investment. If you start having the right conversations, the right questions, the right setting up of work, the right intentionality, you're driving change. And indeed, the team collaboration, if it's not there, and we've seen on the Kineving framework, you need to collaborate in pretty much everything but the simplest tasks. So you need to stimulate collaboration. And things like planning poker, for instance, planning poker, what people don't say, it's not about estimating, it's about the team being on the same page. And when they divide the planning and they get the teams to estimate themselves the stories, you missed out the opportunity for the team to collectively own the objective of the sprint. So it's very important to actually recognize that those ceremonies are not mechanical. They have a reason to be there for the team to work as a team. And we need to address the team. When we give work, it is work for the teams. It's not for the individual, it's for the team. And we need to treat the team as a team. Otherwise, why would they collaborate? So I'm with you. Collaboration is an effort of every minute. And actually, it is the job of the leadership to achieve that. It's the job of the leadership to continually worry, are we getting sufficient collaboration? How we stimulate more? Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Other ideas?
Well, it's just one quick question, Philippe.
Yeah.
Where and how does flow, pull, fit in with this approach and with regards to flow?
Flow.
Pull. Where does pull feature in this system or way of looking at creating this flow? Just wondering where pull sits, because obviously they are both required to get the outcomes we seek.
Yes, and pull, the idea of pull is actually that you condition your whole flow to what actually the outcomes or the outputs you create, right? And the pull works the other way around than the push. So it's what comes out. So what we're releasing is our cadence, and we work upstream from that. And we align from that. So the idea of just in time and so on, why would you do a backlog that is bigger than your deliverability? You're just wasting time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see everything from downstream, what are we customer first? What are we achieving for the customer first there? And the rest, all the rest needs to align to that. And that's difficult, conceptually. I realize it's difficult because organizations are all designed by push. In here, it's about designing organization by pull. And the easiest way to do that is around customer first and understanding how can you maximize your alignment to customer first, to the customer, the part of the product, the whole product or different products, whatever it is that, however you cut the organization, but it needs to deliver a value that is recognized by the customer. And the rest aligns to that. That's what matters.
Excellent. Thank you. Understood. Thank you.
And when you look at scaling, to enterprise organization level, most of the scaling framework, and that's something I explain quite often, are designed to fit like a glove in organizations, and they help making progress. The challenge they have is they keep an organization that functions vertically. The flow in scaling is vertical. It is organizing the flow of work through the hierarchy. Now, flow is an horizontal concept. Flow starts with the customer and ends with the customer. And how can we align to that and have as little overhead as possible? How can we, as directly as possible, can be aligned to the customer? That's flow. And the structure of the organization is just to hold the coherence across the various value streams and so on. So it goes very far into those concepts and organizing multi-team systems and so on, that as much of your capability is actually aligned to the flow, aligned to creating value for customers. Does that make sense, Jacques?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. No, well understood and very well described. Thank you very much. Yeah, I like that. I like that. It's a good, yeah, that fills that gap. Thank you.
And believe me, when you start doing, applying those ideas, you realize you untangle your whole organization. I'm doing that at the moment. That's quite it's quite funny.
Yeah, it's quite enjoyable when you actually see how much you have to entangle, let go of, redo, and then you create that dynamic, high-performing team that you've been talking about. And it is actually the flow of work that actually enables that creation of high-performing teams. And actually, Philippe, you gave me this really good idea, and I think everyone should try this, and that's letters to the leaders and letters to the team, where the team sends letters to the leaders and the leaders send letters to the team, and start opening up that communication. How about it?
Great one. And at the end of the day, that's what sense making is about.
That's what I like.
And let me explain to you rationally why it's a great idea. Is because leadership has assumptions, and in the return to work, there's a lot of people that make their own assumptions based on their partial scan of the situation. And sometimes, our brain is wired to actually make decisions as soon as we pattern match to something we know. And that means that if we have data, and very often, we're going to run a survey, so we look at the data, but everybody has a different take on the data, because they are pattern matching a very subset of data based on what they want or what they understand or what they know. And the only way to break that is actually to provide narratives. And SenseMaker is actually wonderful, as well as being extremely dangerous in a way, because it brings the truth, and people are very uncomfortable sometimes with it. But if they want to make genuine progress, it surfaces all the truth, and it debunks assumptions, and then we have something to work with. And that is, my view is that sense making should be the norm. Continual sense making should be the norm across organizations, to really be in touch with the reality, to make decisions, informed decisions based on good reality information instead of wrong assumptions. And letters to the teams bring that narrative, letters from the teams bring the narratives to actually get the flavor of things. And from that, you get much better sense than just data that people partially scan through.
Thank you, Philippe. That was really good, and absolutely agree with you. I think it's amazing how we actually use the term in organizations, the sense checking. Oh, I'm just going to do some sense checking. I'm going to sense check this, sense check that. It's a common word in business. But actually, you've just shown us how we can really leverage it and use it in a way where the teams, the leadership are sense checking themselves. And I think this is great. Thank you so much.
One thing for that is create the safety to do that. So either by creating the narratives as anonymous, or actually working as a system coaching where you create a really, really strong safety for people to come out.
Mm.
Otherwise, people don't, feel threatened by those things. So thank you very much. I mean, it's wonderful to see all those things, and that's not just for me, it's for you as well. That's your gift of this team, this group tonight. You've taken the time out of your day in your evening, and hopefully there are a lot of things in there that you can go and apply tomorrow at work, and ideas. So thank you very much, and thank you for having me, and thank you for all the great work you did tonight.
Thank you, Felipe, and thank you everyone else for joining me. So coming up next, we have a few things on the horizon. It's not actually on the event section just yet, but we're looking to do some panel talks around psychological safety. So watch this space. I think that seems to be a common practice and common trend at the moment, where a lot of people are talking about that. So we want to open up more conversations in this field. But ultimately, Felipe, it would be really good to have you back. And don't forget, Philippe is doing a training session on this very topic, flow, September 14th to 16th, was it?
It's 15th, 16th.
Oh, 15th to the 16th, yes. And you can find the link in the Miro board. So please, please, please go and have a look, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
All. Good evening, all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Thanks, Don. Hope I can stop.